A rootin' dootin' doo doo doo. A rootin' dootin' doo doo doo. A rootin' dootin' doo doo doo. A doo 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 doo. Make a little song. Sing it all day long. Sing about the sun in your little mun? Yeah, that doesn't work very well. All right. Give it a second. Let's let this update. See if I can get in. Side. Perfect. I can see. And the chat. And it seems to be happening. Now the question is whether chat is really happening, but that's a different problem. Boop! Yay! Cool. All right, well, here we are. We are going to keep talking about Mutant Year Zero and specifically the creation of your arc, of your home. All kinds of good stuff there. So you've made your characters, but now you are going to make your arc. So the characters, if you remember correctly, are all mutants. You were brought to the Ark by the Elder many years ago, and for some reason or another, you are all living your lives as best as you can. So now we're going to discuss making that Ark and kind of its collaborative nature, because you are going to put this all together as as players together, not characters but players. So firstly, the arc is designed almost entirely by player choices. Now, I have my own method for this that varies from the book a little bit. So we're going to talk about the original version in the book and my changes and what I think is kind of best practices as well. So step 0 is really the most important thing. If you don't want to follow this, then don't. It's a good system. It does a good job of setting up the arc, letting your players make choices to influence it and to make it their own. But it kind of assumes you do no work ahead. And it also kind of assumes that your players are at least artist types and that they want to be involved. If you've got players that don't want to be involved, then it's not going to work. They're not going to enjoy it. You may as well just do it for them. And if you want to work ahead, if you want to have some sort of idea what's going on before it happens, then this system isn't really going to function either. So step 1, the zone location. So remember, we have the zone, which is the big area that the Ark and Eden and all the stuff you're going to explore is in. And then we have the Ark, which is the specific home base. So first we're going to talk about the zone. And we are going to talk about where in the world the zone is. It could be anywhere, but remember, this is in our world. It is in the real world, post-apocalypse. So be aware that this is somewhere that really exists. If you don't have a map yet, just describe it. Give some ideas. What area of the world is it in? Is it cold generally? Is it hot generally? Are there hills, mountains, rivers? Just kind of give an idea of what's going on here. Major landmarks, maybe some particularly tall buildings in one section. So use the maps in the book. I'll show those later and talk about them. They are set in New York and London. Like I said, I'll talk about those a little bit later, but they're a really great resource if you just need something to kind of go on. Or do what I did, make up your own. So I knew I wanted to do a city that I knew very well. I lived in New Orleans for over a decade, and I know more than the city, but just all the areas around it. And you really want this space to be pretty large. Mine is 33 sectors wide and 11 sectors tall, and that's 33 miles by 11 miles. So it's big, but Google Earth served me really well. You can kind of use Google Earth to gauge how big your zone actually is. It does also have latitude and longitude. controls, so you can use those to determine as well. It's also a really great way to get the grid onto the area so that you can actually draw it, which is what I wanted to do because I wanted to make it set in New Orleans. I wanted this to be somewhere I knew and kind of go from there. Next, the map of the zone. So there we have to the left New York, or the Dead Apple, as it's described in the book, and on the right, the Big Smoke, or London. You can see the Thames there. You want to get a good map of the zone. It should be around 20 by 30 sectors. Mine's a little bit smaller. It's 11 by 33. So it's 363 sectors instead of 600. But you get the idea. I think they really want you to go 20 by 30 because they want it to be huge. I wanted to go a little smaller. I wanted it to be explorable. But yeah, get your shorelines, get your majors of bodies of water, prominent landmarks, and put notes throughout. And those notes are more rumors than truth. If you go back here, you can kind of see, it's not the best quality image, but there are little, black sections. Those are notes that they made in the book, where one of them says mutants here, or I think one of them is a tall fortress, that sort of idea. They're more rumors than reality. And realize that you will fill in more details as your players explore. Because remember, the original thing in the book assumes you do no work ahead of time. And so this is you designing the base level that stalkers have seen in the little bit of exploration they've done. It's the tall, obvious things that you can see just looking around. Me, I made one for them. So you can see that image on the bottom left. That's the Google Earth image that I took. And I wanted to root it in the real world. I wanted it to be something real. So I made New Orleans. Big part of this game too, like most post-apocalypses, is taking words from the real world and shortening them by taking letters out, because obviously the signs and things have degraded over time, and that means that so it's not New Orleans, it's just Oral. So it took some time. It did. I'll freely admit that, but I think it really eliminates the random factor, and it would be really easy for this game to get very random in a bad way, at least in my opinion, in a bad way. Where you're exploring and you never get what you're looking for, and it would be really easy for the game master to get very confused and to get very overwhelmed, because every sector that you explore, you got to roll dice, generate it really fast, and then actually come up with something interesting to do with it. I did a lot of that ahead of time, which helped me out a lot, at least in my opinion, to be able to get through it. Plus, it was fun. I like it. I like doing things like this. But we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about exploring in a later week, and we'll talk a little bit more about why I think that randomness really helps. So next is the type of arc. The arc could be just about anything. It just has to be something relatively solid. So what does the game say? Well, as long as it can support a couple hundred people, sky's the limit. Go with what you want. It could be a bridge, a farm, a gated community, factory, shipwreck, a mall, a prison, a skyscraper, a stack of containers, a subway station, or an oil rig, or literally anything else. The game gives you these options, I think, because they wanted to show that it could be so many different things. And I think that's really, really key, because you want your players to think outside the box. This is a post-apocalypse, and it is sometimes difficult for people to imagine what could be in the future after degradation has really occurred. So what did I do? I gave them options. I selected 7 different spaces on the map, and I said, okay, this is your 7 options, and I gave them just a few words to know what each of them is. So I said there's a ship wrecked on the receded lake, there's an urban farm with greenhouses, There's the old Folgers factory. Yes, Folgers, the coffee brand. It comes from New Orleans. There's a floating platform in the bayou. There's a collection of houses kept mostly together. There's the Crescent City Connection Bridge. And there's a warehouse full of boxes and stuff. And then I let my players decide just on that. They have no more information than that basic description. So next, your arc position. Now, obviously, for myself, that was already determined. We're going to talk about that in a second. So what sector in the zone is your arc actually? Game gives a couple pieces of advice. Avoid the direct center and avoid the edges and go near water. Avoid the direct center because the center should be the most rot-infected area. That's probably where the bomb actually dropped. Avoid the edges because it would be very easy to be completely far away from anything that is an option. So my friend Zach just commented, Bourbon Street, just Bourbon Street. The French Quarter is somehow radiation proof. So interestingly, because of the size that you're operating under here, the French Quarter is pretty much just one sector. And I didn't want it to be an option. A, because it's too easy. And B, because that means that I can make it an explorable sector, which will have some very intriguing things in it. It also does come in later. I'll talk a little bit about my design here and where I put those positions and why they kind of matter because of the position of something very important in the game, which is Eden. Now, you can not determine where Eden is. You can find it randomly. The problem that I have with that is, again, that randomness factor that we'll probably talk about in a couple weeks. So last tip from the book, go near a water source of some kind. You don't have to, but the Ark does have a pretty big collection of rot-free water. And so, and that's very important. Like, without that, you're just screwed. It would not be a fun game. You would just die. That's not great. So, whether or not we'll actually talk about the water supply later. So we'll get into that later. I think this is just straight up wrong, personally. The core of Mutant Year Zero is rooted in our world. So you're going to tell me what the Ark is, and then tell me where it is. To me, that just seems backwards. If I was going to follow the rules in the book, I would just reverse these steps. I would determine where the Ark is and then determine what it is. I just think it's so important to have some connection to the world itself. And if you tell me, oh, it's a bridge, well, cool. Now you have to, find somewhere with a bridge rather than find a sector in the zone and then say, oh, well, there's all this stuff in there. What is it among those things? What is the Ark? I would separate them. Okay, first of all, it's not Patty O'Brien's, it's Pat O'Brien's, and Brian is spelled with an E, not an A. First of all. Second of all, no. Also, Pat O'Brien's is not actually the origin of the hurricane. It's the origin of the modern hurricane, but the original hurricane was created by a guy who went out on the dock, in the docks, and sold a collection of rum and fruit juices for very, very cheap to various sailors as they got off boats. So that is not the origin of the hurricane. And Zach, I know you don't know anything about New Orleans, but this is inexcusable. You be better, get better. Moving on. So, next step is the Ark map. And this is really important because this is when you're going to get a little creative. So draw a rough map of the Ark. Nothing crazy. If you're not artistic, go real basic. Just give me some general shapes. But there is a couple markings that are really important. Mark your shelters, mark the Elder's Refuge, mark your boss's dens. And this can absolutely come up later. Just know that, it's kind of important for you to have some idea of where things actually are. If you've got an artist in the group, let them draw it. Let it look nice. I think that could be really cool, to have players that have a map that's really, involved. and really primo. Like that map to the left there, or on the previous page, there was 3 options that were just really, really great looking and have things pointed out and all that good stuff. If it was me, I got nothing. Like I said, I'm not an artist. I'm a writer. And most of the steps, the rest of the art creation, I pretty much use straight from the book. So, if I was going to do a map of the arc, I would probably use one of the included ones in the book. There's a couple, they're not great, but there's something. There's a scrap village and something else that I don't remember. Something about a boat, I think, like a shipwrecked boat. Or beached ship, that's what it was called. Scrap village and beached ship. But yeah, so the rest of the steps, I'm just going to go over what the book recommends and kind of my tips and tricks and journal advice. But this is the end of where I actively, completely diverge from the book in how to handle arc creation. Next step, the Elder. I really wanted him to jump out at you there. I thought it was pretty cool. Blue Meeple is a friend of mine from New Orleans, and I spelled it Metri for a reason, and you know why. I don't know how many people there just pronounce it Metri. It ain't Metri, it's Metri. You lived there, you should know. So yeah, step 6, the Elder. What is the Elder like? Where does he live? This is where you want to mark on that map, the Elder's quarters. This is an important piece of information. The Elder is who brought you all here, and even if the mutants hate each other now, even if the characters and the bosses don't get along, you were all raised by the same man, and that's really important to what makes the Elder such an important figure. This also determines where the Dawn Vault is, which is where artifacts from the old world are kept. And so it's very important that this be, a hub of activity. It's a central place, because, not too many years ago, the Elder was not old and infirmed, and he had more sway over the mutants, over the people. And so him being at the center of it all is kind of important, at least to me. Next step, the bosses. Yes, I'm listing on the left here bits from the song Like a Boss. I had to. So the bosses are very important. They are really your most important people, politics-wise, on the arc. Okay, you may have one or more as a player, but the important thing to me is there should be an odd number of them. If there's an even number, like if there's 4, it would be really easy for them to go 2 on 2, and then they gang up, they group up. The point, to my mind, is for the bosses to always be guiding the drama and to always be at odds with each other, because maybe one of them becomes a little bit stronger than the others, and now these differing forces have to gang up to take that boss out, or to at least stop them from making too many important decisions. I really do advise, in the book, there are 7 or 8 different kind of archetypes of bosses. I've got some pictures on the left to kind of give you an ideas. There's a despot, the bureaucrat, the kingpin, the collector, the cultist, just kind of some basic ideas for how they should think, how they should act. And I think those are actually really important. I like them a lot. I would probably roll randomly, honestly. I wouldn't want to leave this up too much to the players. What I would probably leave up to them is actually creating the bosses and how they differ from those archetypes. But I would say, okay, you've got a cultist, a despot, and a bureaucrat. Cool. Here's the general description. Now tell me what makes your bosses unique and weird and special. Next step, other NPCs. Now, your players described some NPCs during character creation. They had to describe, the person that they wanted to protect and the person that they hated. Add some details to those, okay? Let's make those NPCs people, And I think that's really important to have them be more important. And then add some more. They don't have to be full characters, but if a PC dies, chances are the more described people and the more important and noted NPCs are the ones that your players are going to take over and then end up becoming a PC in the end. So yeah, just have some ideas here, because there is a few hundred people living in the Ark, and they're all people. They're not all just NPCs waiting to give quests. They are full people with thoughts, feelings, loves, hates, and everything in between. Next step. Population. So this is really, really easy. Just figure out how many people there are in the Ark. It should be more than 200, but no more than 300. The book just says more than 200. Personally, I think it's really important to not go too much above 300, because it has to be few enough that everybody knows everybody. But there also has to be not too many, because they have to fit in the Ark. And if your Ark is not huge, then there probably aren't going to be too many people. And this is really important for some reasons we're going to talk about in later videos. People die in the Ark constantly, and every session an amount of them will just die. And that's really important to figure out, how many people there actually are, because at a certain point, there is no hope left. And that's the balance of this game. Is it is all about hope to find Eden, to be safe, to take care of each other, all these things. But there is the constant despair that people are constantly dying, and the mutants, do not reproduce. Next up, your water source. We mentioned that before. Let's talk about it. So where is the water coming from? All right. Like I said, the Ark has access to clean, rot-free water. So this is why it advised you to pick a sector close to water when you're picking where the Ark is. It doesn't have to be. There are options there. Like you could have an old well. You could have a pipe moving water from maybe even outside of the zone, or just from a safe area. You could have a clean creek flowing through the Ark. There could be a purification device. There could just be a rain collector. One of the example images of an Ark art is a giant, like, kind of amusement park looking thing, but the top is just a massive rain collector. And that's an easy way to get clean, rot-free water. Next, development levels. So this is a very important part of the Ark, because this is what's really going to separate, two different games could have an Ark in the same zone that are both bridges that have, well, I guess you're never going to get all these things the same, but this is where your players really have some input into what is going on in the Ark before the beginning of the game. So development levels are 4 levels, and they represent new society being developed, but they also kind of represent decay as well, because they can increase and decrease. So your 4 levels are food supply, culture, technology, and warfare. We're going to go over each of those in a little bit more detail. So starting with food supply, very important. How many people can the Ark realistically feed? There is a collection of old rot-free cans from before the war. But beyond that, you're going to have to start growing food or getting food or somehow, having a food supply. Can you grow it? Are you just existing on old cans? Can you care about taste? The further in, the higher your food supply rating goes, the more you can care, because there's plenty of food to go around. This directly affects the exchange rate of bullets for grub. So at the beginning, you can exchange 1 bullet for 1 grub, which is huge, because bullets are kind of in many ways a source of a currency in this game. Everything is kind of a currency, because everything is all about all about, exchanging your resources, especially with a fixer. But bullets is probably the closest to what I would call a currency. So you start out 1-to-1. You can eventually get up to 1-to-4. So one bullet can get you 4 rations of grub, which is huge. That'll feed a party for a day. That'll feed a full party for one day. It also directly affects the session body count. I mentioned this before. Like I said, we'll talk about that more in a later video, but just know that each session, some people in the arc are going to die, and if your food supply is low, that number is going to be much, much, much higher. Next up, culture. So can you express yourself beyond grunts? Do you know what a government is? Is there art in the arc? Culture is a big part of, feeling like these mutants, these people, are moving beyond just surviving. Now they are thriving. This doesn't really affect a whole lot, but it does affect what projects that people can undertake. The higher in culture you go, the bigger culture projects that you can take on. It's very, very important. This is also kind of the biggest way that you can avoid the arc just devolving into insanity, into cannibalism and infighting and the bosses just having pure control, all kinds of stuff like that. Next up, technology. So do you know what a machine is? Can you make electricity? Can you make a distillery? This is a big part of the game, honestly. Technology being high is vitally important because it directly affects your knowledge of artifacts from the old world and their function. Okay, it directly affects what the people can make in the arc. Once you have a certain level of technology, you can make a distillery. You can make hydroponic vegetables and be able to grow food for much, much cheaper and easier and all these things. Technology and culture really kind of reach out and grab all 4 development levels and kind of directly affect what you can do in the arc. Last level, warfare. Is the arc ready for war? Are the people organized? And is there fortifications of some kind? At base level of warfare, it's just kind of, hey, you've got a ship. There is this wrecked ship. With a high level of warfare, you've got cannons, and there's walls, and the people have a militia. And if there is a large scale attack, which is a game term, there are specific things that can happen that are large scale attacks, which usually end up killing a lot of people in the arc. It's a bad time. But the higher your warfare level, the better you are at those large-scale attacks, lower chance of a whole bunch of people dying at once, or even just being taken over. There are factions within the zone that could take over the arc from you, and that's directly because you lose a large-scale attack. So, pretty much the last step is the season. What season is it? It really is that simple. There's 4. Choose one. But honestly, it is important, at least in my opinion. This game takes time, is the best way I would put it. Even when your sessions may only be days, but your sessions often constitute, 1 or 2 days worth of game time. And that's kind of interesting. And that means, 15 sessions, well, that's a month. That's huge. And that's only if it's 1 or 2 days. If it's 3 or 4 days or even a big time skip, it would be possible to pass by a week in a session pretty easily. But remember, and this is really the most important part for any game master doing this, is all 4 of the seasons suck. Winter is too cold. Summer is too hot. Spring is too humid, and autumn is too dry. And it's never going to be, oh, well, we chose spring, so it's going to be nice out for 3 months. Oh, hell no. It is going to rain every damn day, and it sucks, and the ground is wet and muddy, and getting around is terrible. There is no part of any season that is good. Remember, a big part of this game, like I said last video, is tearing your players down. Rather, your characters. Tearing your characters down. You know, it is a constant weathering of the environment. And no matter what season it is, the environment sucks. So, you've made an arc, and that's character creation. So you first each make your characters, then you collaboratively create the arc, and then you get ready for all the hurt to come. Next week, well, not exactly. We're actually gonna kind of skip one. We'll talk about that in a second. But 2 weeks from now, exploration. We're gonna talk about getting around the zone, looking for Eden, all the game master things to have to do with that, as well as the player things. Talk about some skills, uses for them, all kinds of good stuff. But most importantly, next week we are going to talk some more about Dungeon 23. Not a whole lot has happened in this last week. I'm going to go over some more next week and really get into description of what I've made, how my design is going, what my thoughts are, just all kinds of good stuff. And I'm also going to talk about my new game. So this Friday is session 0 for my new campaign. I've got some friends coming over. We're going to select what we're playing, do some character creation, and go from there. So I'm going to talk about my thoughts on session 0, how to do one, what I think is important, all kinds of good things. So that is all that I have for this week. Homework? If you were going to choose a city, probably should have written this down in the presentation. If you were going to choose a city to put the zone in, what city and why? What interesting things are there around that area, in that 20 mile by 30 mile area around that city that would be intriguing and interesting? So for now, my lovely friends who are actually watching me, I really appreciate it. You guys don't know how important this is to me to be able to get this off the ground.